Have you ever wondered how much your pottery can improve in 7 years? I'm comparing my very first mug to where I am today and sharing a few of the biggest lessons I've learned along the way. Hey guys, welcome to today's video. We are going to be talking about mugs. So when I first started doing pottery, I had no idea how to make a good mug. As you can see, this is the very first piece that I made. Some of you watching may be thinking, that's really incredible, and it is. It is for a first mug. There's a lot of things about this mug that I actually still incorporate into the mugs that I make today. So if you're interested in seeing the progression of mugs and learning tips on how to become a better potter, keep watching. So this is the very first mug that I've ever made, and this was around 2018. I have been doing pottery for 8 years now. So from this mug to this was at the end of 2024. It's so crazy to think about the differences of each of these mugs. And that's what we're going to be doing in today's video. We're going to be discussing the progression of my pottery and how you as a potter can progress in your pieces as well. So as I was mentioning earlier, this was my first pottery mug, and honestly, it is not too bad. When I first started doing pottery around 2018, I remember having such an issue with getting taller, or pulling up is the correct pottery term. As you can tell, even this mug was probably 2019. The height difference here is insane. These two mugs were made a lot closer together, and you can tell they are very squatty. I guess that would be the good word to describe them. And they both have a similar build, meaning that they're just tinier in nature with a wider bottom. Both of these pieces are not trimmed with a foot. So a foot in pottery is when you have a defined rim at the bottom of the piece, and typically it has more of a raised edge. So this is one of my newer pieces, and this is a really good example of a foot. Typically in pottery, bowls are the only thing that have foots, bowls and plates, like huge serving bowls, huge serving plates. But I really liked the concept of a foot being on a cup, because I think foots, when you use them in pottery, they give more of an elegant and almost like feminine quality to them, because they're just a little bit more ornate. When you put a foot on something, usually you're giving it just this extra level of elegance and almost superiority, if you will. So the difference between a foot and non-foot on my recent pieces is here. So I have a very defined edge still, which if I don't do a foot, I like to have a defined edge, because this is a lot more seamless and classic than something like this, where the edge is not very clear cut and it just looks sort of sloppy. And if you are a potter, then you know cleaning the bottoms of your pieces whenever you're working on something just can be a huge hassle. So if you already have sort of a cleared off bottom, the glaze won't run. So I do like to have a little bit of leverage from the end of my piece to where the glaze begins, just because it is a lot easier to not get glaze all over your kiln shelf. Another thing that I did when I first started was I made my handles completely flat at the top. I don't know if you can see that, but they're sort of like pressed down to being completely flat, to where they sit like this on a table. And another thing that I did was I made the handles completely seamless with the lip of the cup. So the lip is exactly what you would think it is. It's where you drink from the vessel. So now in my work, I do a traditional curved handle, and I find that aesthetically, this just looks a lot more pleasing than something like this. This is way more primitive, which is fine if that's what you're going for, but this is going to be that traditional, right, like handle that you see on cups and mugs. And another thing that is specific to my pieces that I like to do is, even if I do a rounded handle, I like to come back and make sure that you can still sit them on a flat surface, even with them being turned upside down. The reason I do that is because people stack their pieces of pottery, people stack their mugs differently in cabinets. Some people do this. My grandparents actually stacked their cups this way, but me and my husband stack ours upright. So I wanted it to be versatile for people who are just putting things back, and you think about the dishwasher, or if you dishwasher mugs, but wanting them to be able to sit in there. And obviously, if you're just starting out, that might not be things that you're thinking about when you're just wanting to get a first piece. But over time, you will learn and figure out what you like and how you want your pieces to have a style. And that's the beautiful thing about practice, is you can eventually develop your own style and own look with the pieces that you create. Another thing that I do in every single mug I make now is have a flared lip. And as you can see, this one does not have a flared lip. And the reason why I flare my lips out is because when you're drinking, it's a lot easier for the coffee to go into your mouth. When you have more of a rounded lip like this, the coffee tends to drip down the sides, and it's not nearly as comfortable to drink from. Another thing I did at the beginning when I first was doing pottery was, the studio I learned pottery in only had dip glazes. Now, if you're a potter, you're familiar with dip glazing. You basically take those oversized tongs and it latches onto your piece. You dunk them in the 10-gallon bucket and so on and so forth. The studio that I first learned pottery in actually made their own glazes. They made quite a few of their own glazes. And so this was dipped and this was dipped. But the studio that my husband and I own now, we only brush glaze. And brush glazing is a completely different experience than dip glazing. So for example, this is some surface design on the bottom, but this, it looks like it was dipped. It looks like it was used like with a traditional dip glaze that most people use. This was a brush. So learning to do brush glazing is a learning curve. This was also brush glazing. And this from this is just crazy different. So I honestly think that for a lot of pieces, you can get a really interesting custom result. This is also brush glazing. It doesn't look like it, but it is. You can get a really incredible custom result with brush glazing. Brush glazing is a lot slower of a process than dip glazing, because if you think about it, all you're doing is taking a piece, dunking it once or twice, twice if you want it to be thick, in a bucket, and then you're just going. You're done glazing, you're putting it in the kiln, and then it's ready to go. For this mug to be glazed, this is about 5 coats of hand-painted glaze. I do use fan brushes, so I'm not using like a micro 1mm paintbrush, but it still is a lot more of a complicated and a lot more of a time commitment of a process than dip glazing. I will say one of the reasons I think I prefer brush glazing now is because of the versatility you can get. With dip glazing, the glazes can be kind of expensive, so a lot of people only have 4, 5, 6 buckets of glaze that they can choose from. With brush glazing, we have about 80 different little pints of glazes that we can choose from. But it's something to take into consideration if you do live or have a small studio or a small space that you're working with. Brush glazing is the way to go. So that's just something to take into consideration. This is also brush glazing, but this is strictly under glaze. With pottery, there's so many options. There's so much versatility, and it's sort of insane. All of these things are trial and error. Getting here took a long time. 2022, this is actually, well, this is 25. This is also 25. These are 24, meaning 2024, 2025. This from this is a really big difference. It's a big difference in glazing. It's a big difference in handle application. It's a big difference in lip. And you can even see here in this mug, my lip on the piece is uneven and it's got some crackage there. But to me, the pieces that you make at the beginning are so important to keep, because I would never be able to know the amount of progress that I have done unless if I were to keep these pieces. Now this piece is a little bit closer to the type of things that I am making now, and that's because this piece wasn't done that long ago, probably only 3 years ago. And it's crazy to even think about this to this. So this video is just a really great learning tool if you're wanting to get different ideas on how to improve your pieces, but it's also just a really good testament to what practice can get you and just what not giving up can get you. Because if I gave up because this wasn't, impressive, then I never would be able to get here. So I hope this encourages you, and I hope that you took something from this video. If you liked this content, then please click subscribe and ring the notification bell so that you get notified when we have new videos. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye. Thanks for watching.